Welcome back to the Journey of the Wise. There's a truth that we often inadvertently forget in the frantic whirl of modern life. Communication is not merely the exchange of information. Deep down, every word we utter, every glance we exchange, or even a deliberate silence, is a link in the network of power, emotion, and influence. Sages of old and psychologists of today all meet at a common point. They regard communication and social conduct as a double-edged sword. One hand, it is the white side, subtle social skills that help us build bridges, create rapport, and achieve sustainable success based on kindness. But on the other hand, it also possesses a shadowy black side, where words become psychological weapons to manipulate, control, and distort reality for personal gain. During the moments ahead, we will not only learn how to become a skillful communicator, we will together embark on a journey through 3 dimensions of human wisdom. First, we will explore the art of winning hearts positively through the most sophisticated techniques of modern communication and unspoken rules of conduct. Next, we will step back into the past to contemplate the ancient strategies of Quiguzi, where silence and observation become the power to control the situation. And finally, we will bravely face the dark corners of manipulative psychology to understand how the brain is deceived and how a wise person protects themselves from toxic individuals. True wisdom does not lie in how many schemes you possess, but in understanding them clearly to choose for yourself a righteous way of living. A wise person is one who knows how to use skills to create value, while remaining vigilant enough not to become a victim in the psychological games of others. We can infer that, in a society where information and words are surrounded by ambiguity, equipping oneself with a clear psychological map is more urgent than ever. You do not need to be a manipulator to survive, but you must certainly understand manipulation to keep yourself whole in the social eras from past to present. Let us enter the first chapter, the art of rapport, where body language and subtlety reign supreme. Chapter 1. The art of conquest, the white side. When subtlety speaks. In the first layer of communicative wisdom, we shall step together into the world of the white side. This is not a place of profound schemes, but a realm of empathy, respect, and the rules of conduct that help an ordinary person become exceptional in the eyes of others. Modern psychological researchers, most notably Lael Lowndes, have pointed out that first impressions are not built upon eloquent speeches, but through micro-behaviors. These are details so small that sometimes our brains perceive them only through intuition rather than logic. 1. Body language, the power of wordless presence. Imagine the way a wise person enters a room. They do not need to speak, yet their presence radiates an aura of trust. The secret lies in a technique we call the flooding smile. Instead of flashing an immediate social smile upon meeting, the wise person will look into the other's eyes for a second, pausing to acknowledge their presence, and only then let a radiant smile slowly spread across their face. That brief delay is proof that this smile is meant specifically for you, not a pre-prepared mask for everyone. Accompanying this are sticky eyes. In a conversation, maintaining a gaze not only demonstrates confidence, but also absolute respect. Even when the other person has finished speaking, the wise person holds the gaze for a small moment longer before looking away. It creates an invisible bond, making the listener feel they are truly being heard. And if someone new enters the conversation, remember the big baby pivot technique. So instead of merely turning your head with indifference, rotate your entire body toward the newcomer, just as a child directs their full attention towards someone they love. This action sends a powerful signal. Your presence is important to me. 2. The art of words, moving beyond blunt questions. When words are spoken, the wise understand that language is a tool to nurture the flow of conversation. They strictly avoid blunt, one-word answers. The never the naked job/city technique reminds us. When someone asks where you are from or what you do not just answer with a proper noun. Attach an interesting detail, a small story, so the other person has a clue to continue the narrative. If you find yourself stuck for a topic, use the parroting technique. So simply repeat the last few words of the other person's sentence with an inviting tone. This encourages them to explain further, helping you understand their mindset without having to struggle for complex questions. Particularly in the art of praise, the sage never offers direct flattery crudely. They use grapevine glory, praising someone behind their back so that the compliment finds its own way back to the recipient's ears is many times more valuable than direct praise. It brings absolute credibility because it contains no ulterior motive for personal gain. 3. Unspoken rules of conduct, the boundaries of civility. Beside communicative techniques, wisdom is also demonstrated through adherence to unspoken social rules that no one teaches in school. These are the respect for personal boundaries and profound gratitude. A wise person will never ask about another's salary, for they understand that a person's value cannot be measured by numbers. They know how to split the bill fairly. Do not abuse the kindness of the host, and always remember the names of everyone around them. Because to every person, their own name is the sweetest sound. At the dining table or in public spaces, they maintain moderation. No complaining about trivial matters. No taking photos indiscriminately that affect the privacy of others. This politeness is not hypocrisy. It is the manifestation of a soul that thinks of others. 4. Reflections on authenticity. However, we must pause to infer an important point. There is an opinion that these techniques, if applied mechanically, will become theatrical or fake. This is the greatest point of contention in the modern art of communication. The truth is, if your smile is not accompanied by hospitality, if your eyes are sticky, but your mind is calculating, the other person will sooner or later sense the instability. Technique is merely the bridge, while sincerity is the foundation. A wise person uses technique to clear the path for their sincerity to spread most effectively, not to use them as a replacement for the soul. Concluding Chapter 1, we have seen the face of the white side, where subtlety helps us integrate and shine. But life is not only the rosy color of politeness. There are times when, to preserve oneself and the greater cause, we need a different kind of wisdom, deeper, quieter, and sometimes colder. Let us be ready to enter Chapter 2, where we will explore the ancient strategies of Quiguzi. Chapter 2. Strategy and Power, the Gray Side. The Teachings of Quiguzi. If the previous chapter featured radiant smiles and modern politeness, then in this chapter, we shall step back into the mystical shadows of history to meet one of its most enigmatic figures, Quiguzi. This is the realm of the gray side, the intersection between the wisdom of survival and profound calculations. In the philosophy of Quiguzi, the world never stands still. He believed that change gives rise to events, and events give rise to schemes. Every change in the world breeds an occurrence, and from that occurrence, strategies begin to take shape. And for the wise, communication is not merely for making friends. It is a silent battle of wits to control the situation and preserve oneself. 1. The art of Bai He. The mastery of opening and closing. The first and most important secret in the strategies of Quiguzi is the art of Bai He, otherwise known as the art of opening and closing. The wise understand that to hear the heart of another, one must first know how to be silent. Opening is to let others reveal themselves. Closing is for oneself to receive and conceal. When facing a situation where the truth is yet unclear, the sage chooses to close, maintaining a silent and discreet demeanor. Why is silence so powerful? We can infer that, based on human cognitive biases, silence creates an invisible psychological pressure. When faced with a static void, an opponent tends to feel anxious and wants to fill it with words. The moment they speak the most to break the silence is the moment they most easily reveal their flaws and true intentions. The wise person at this point only needs to observe to open at the right time, offering inducements that lead the opponent to automatically surrender information. 2. The art of Neijian. Penetrating the inner mind. After probing intentions through the art of Bai He, the sage employs the art of Neijian. This is the art of creating a deep connection from within the inner mind of another. Quiguzi taught that, to win someone over, one must know the emotion within them. Neijian is essentially finding the key to unlock the door of the human heart. That key usually lies at two fatal weaknesses: emotion and interest. The wise will use emotion to move those who value righteousness, and use interest to entice those who value gain. We can see a close connection here with the reciprocity cognitive bias. When you give something the opponent craves, whether emotion or material, they develop a psychological urge to compensate or follow your lead. Once you have captured their heart or their purse, their reason will sooner or later belong to you as well. 3. The art of Fanying. Throwing a stone to probe the path. In complex social interactions, the sage never walks a path where they do not yet know the depth of the water. The art of Fanying, reaction, is the method of throwing a stone to probe the path. Before making an important decision, they will throw out a provocative word or a feigned concurring opinion to gauge the opponent's attitude. The other person's reaction to that small stone will reveal their true standing, whether they are a tiger, a pig, or a hidden dragon. Listen to the words of the past to know the future. That is how the wise use behavioral data to predict an opponent's direction. 4. The art of conduct, the wisdom of flexibility. The power of ancient strategy also lies in the ability for absolute adaptation. Quiguzi emphasized flexibility through specific techniques of conduct, playing the fool. This is the pinnacle of self-concealment. When in a weak position or under scrutiny, the sage chooses to feign ignorance, showing no interest in fame or gain so the opponent lowers their guard. So in the shadow of that naivety, they silently accumulate internal strength and await their opportunity. Borrowing strength. A skilled person is not one who does everything, but one who knows how to use the wind to carry their boat far. They know how to use the authority of the strong or the power of the crowd to achieve their goals without shedding too much blood. Knowing when to leave is the ultimate strategy. When the timing, the terrain, and the people are not in one's favor, the wise do not choose blind confrontation. They know that stepping back is not cowardice, but preserving force for a future turning of the tides. 5. The boundary between wisdom and manipulation. We cannot deny a major point of contention. The techniques of Quiguzi are often regarded as ruthless or too calculating. Dividing an opponent's internal ranks or exploiting another's greed is often judged as unethical by modern social standards. However, viewing this neutrally, we must clearly define the boundary. On one side is strategy for survival, and on the other is deception, when the wise use strategy to protect themselves and those they love in a world full of traps. Conversely, the petty use them to profit from the suffering of others. The difference lies not in the scheme, but in the intention and mindset of the user. As Quiguzi said, success is the accumulation of virtue. A scheme only truly has value when it is directed toward a purpose higher than personal selfishness. Closing the chapter on the gray side, we see that ancient wisdom teaches us how to observe coldly and act decisively. But beneath those subtle communication techniques or profound strategies, there still exists a dark zone that we must name in order to avoid. It is a place where words are distorted and psychology is violated. Chapter 3. The Shadow of Manipulation. Learning to identify those silently controlling your life when words become shackles. Welcome to the deepest and darkest layer of communicative wisdom, the black side. If in the previous 2 chapters, we learned about connection and strategy to gain an advantage, then in this chapter, we will learn to see through the psychological shackles that silently bind human beings. Psychological manipulation is not the art of persuasion. Persuasion is when we provide reasoning so that both parties look in the same direction. Manipulation, however, is when a person secretly controls the thoughts and behaviors of others for personal gain, creating an extreme power imbalance. Here, the victims are unaware they are being controlled. They imagine they are acting out of free will, but in reality, they are dancing to the strings of a puppet master. 1. The invisible weapons of the manipulator. Manipulators do not use whips. They use your own emotions and perceptions against you. Let us review the most sophisticated techniques confirmed by psychological sources. Gaslighting, distorting reality. This is one of the most toxic forms. The manipulator will deny the truth and distort information, causing you to doubt your own memory, sanity, and cognitive abilities. They will say, "You remembered it wrong," or "You're being too sensitive," until you completely lose your footing in reality and must rely on their explanations. Love bombing, emotional saturation. Before tightening the shackles, a manipulator often uses excessive sweetness. They display fake, intense affection, showering you with gifts and constant attention to make you feel like the most important person in the world. But we can infer that the purpose of this is not love, but to create an emotional anchor, causing you to fall into a state of dependency and lose your defenses before the abuse begins. Guilt tripping, instilling guilt. A professional manipulator is often an expert at playing the victim. They twist every event so that you feel like the one at fault, even when you have done nothing wrong. By evoking your compassion and conscience, they force you to concede and follow their will to soothe that feeling of guilt. An example of the invisible hand of guilt. Imagine an office where Peter, a diligent employee, has just brilliantly completed his project and is preparing to go home after an exhausting work week to celebrate his daughter's birthday. At that moment, Thomas, a colleague who is frequently late, approaches with a sorrowful face. Thomas sighs, places a thick stack of documents on the table, and says in a choking voice, "Peter, I know you have a family party tonight. You should go ahead. I just got news that my mother back home is sick again. My mind is so frazzled, I can't concentrate on finishing this report. The boss said if it's not on his desk tomorrow morning, I'll be fired. I'm so useless, always letting personal matters affect everyone. Anyway, you go and have fun with your daughter, never mind me. At worst, I'll lose my job. I guess that's just my unlucky fate. No one to help in a time of crisis." As you can see, in this situation, when Peter has been shackled by his own kindness, the manipulator does not use force. They use your conscience as a hostage. A wise person will realize that helping is a choice based on volition, not an obligation arising from the fear of being judged as a bad person. Passive-aggressive. Sometimes their strongest weapon is silence. They use silent treatment or subtle sarcasm to mentally torment you without ever raising their voice. 2. Wooden language and ambiguity. When manipulation becomes a system, manipulation does not only occur between individuals. Academic studies, notably research on the Romanian secret police system, Securitate, have shown that language can become a tool for social control on a large scale. A wise person needs to recognize what is called wooden language, langue de bois, and ambiguity. These are types of empty, vague, yet imposing words designed to eliminate critical thinking. When every concept becomes blurred, when lies are repeated using academic or authoritative terms, people gradually lose the ability to distinguish right from wrong and accept control as a matter of course. 3. Why is our brain so easily trapped? A haunting question is raised. Why can an intelligent person be manipulated? The answer lies in cognitive biases, the pre-programmed errors in the human brain that the wise must always guard against. Manipulators often exploit the halo effect. Just because they have an impressive appearance or are educated, we default to thinking they are good people and ignore toxic red flags. They exploit the authority bias, making us afraid to argue back because they are in the position of a boss, teacher, or leader. Or they use the rule of reciprocity, giving you a small gift to force you to repay them with a much larger value. So we can infer that manipulation is essentially an attack on the best human instincts: trust, compassion, and social compliance. 4. Identifying the face of the manipulator. Manipulators often hide behind 3 common masks. The professional victim, always talking about their misfortunes so you won't have the heart to refuse them. The blamer, never taking responsibility. Every failure is due to circumstances or due to you. The intellectual bully, using specialized knowledge or complex arguments to make you feel ignorant and forced to submit to their opinion. Concluding Chapter 3, we have passed through the valley of darkness. Understanding manipulation is not so that we become manipulators, but so that we know how to protect the light of our own souls. But our journey does not stop at fear. A wise person needs to know how to stand firm and resist. Let us step into the next chapter, or where we learn about defense and ethics, the way to keep ourselves whole amidst a world full of schemes and shadows. Chapter 4. Defense and Ethics, the Mettle of the Awakened. After journeying through the smiles of politeness, the complexities of strategy, and the shadows of manipulation, we stand here to answer the most vital question. How do we live in a world full of traps while keeping our souls whole? How does one become a person of formidable communicative mettle without losing their inherent goodness? The answer does not lie in learning thousands of new schemes, but in awareness. 1. Knowledge is the sturdiest shield. Psychological defense begins with a clear understanding of how our own brains operate. A manipulator can only enter when they find cognitive gaps. Therefore, the first step to becoming an awakened person is to recognize your own cognitive biases. See, when you understand the halo effect, you will no longer easily grant absolute trust to someone just because they have an elegant appearance or a resounding reputation. You know to pause and observe their actual deeds instead of being deceived by an external label. When you understand the rule of reciprocity, you will no longer feel blindly indebted to small gifts or unexpected help. You know how to appreciate kindness, but you are also vigilant enough to realize when a gift is actually a bait. We can infer that a wise person is not someone who is never deceived, but someone who understands exactly why they could be deceived and always maintains a moment of stillness to observe their own reactions to psychological stimuli. Divey. 2. The boundary between persuasion and manipulation. A major point of contention we previously mentioned. Does learning the techniques of Lael Lowndes or the strategies of Quiguzi turn us into bad people? The boundary between persuasion and manipulation is sometimes as thin as a hair, yet it carries an entirely different essence. Persuasion is when you use subtlety to create understanding, bringing benefits to both parties. And most importantly, you are transparent about your intentions. Manipulation is when you stealthily control others merely to serve your own selfishness, regardless of the harm they must endure. The wise choose the path of persuasion. They use the flooding smile or the Neijian technique not to entrap people, but to open a favorable communicative space where sincerity can be heard. Technique is merely the means. The purpose is what defines your human value. 3. The 70-second strategy. The pinnacle of strategy is letting go among the 72 strategies of Quiguzi. There is one final tactic often overlooked by the world because it is so seemingly simple, yet it is the essence of the entire system. Seek no fame or fortune. Keep the heart pure. Why is this a strategy? We can infer that manipulators usually attack human greed, fear, and ambition. If you are not bound by vain reputation, if you do not chase the illusions of wealth at all costs, you become invisible to all psychological traps. A person with a calm mindset, who knows contentment and lives truthfully with themselves, possesses a natural power of resistance that no scheme can break. The mystery and majesty of a sage do not come from how many plots they conceal, but from having an inner self as solid as a mountain, unshaken by praise, blame, or trivial power games. 4. Ethics as the foundation of true power. Based on studies of leadership and power, we see that lasting trust is only built on a foundation of ethics. Those who use wooden language or manipulation may achieve power quickly, but that power will always be surrounded by suspicion and will collapse when crisis strikes. The wise understand that social conduct is not about defeating others, but about mastering oneself. Using wisdom to protect oneself, using subtlety to connect people, and using ethics to lead, that is true mettle. Concluding Chapter 4, we have found our anchor. An awakened person is one who possesses a warm heart, but carries a head full of experience. They know the darkness well so as never to get lost in it, and they hold the strategies to protect their own light. Chapter 5. The mechanism of delusion, when the brain betrays itself. We have journeyed through modern tactics, ancient strategies, and even the dark segments of manipulation. But have you ever wondered, why are those techniques so effective? Why does even the most lucid person sometimes fall into the trap of words? The answer does not lie in a weakness of will, but in the very way our brains operate. What we call communicative wisdom is actually a deep understanding of the blind spots in thinking, also known as cognitive biases. These programming flaws are the wide-open doors through which the strategies of Quiguzi or the techniques of Lael Lowndes enter. 1. The halo effect, the perfect mask. Recall the flooding smile technique or the VIP confidence we discussed. Why does a single smile or a high-status demeanor possess the power to change the entire situation? It is thanks to the halo effect. The human brain tends to believe that if a person has an impressive appearance, a confident manner, or makes a good first impression, then they must surely be good, intelligent, and trustworthy. This is a high-risk mental shortcut. Manipulators understand this very well. They polish their outward appearance and gestures to create a fake halo, causing you to voluntarily lower your defensive barriers without even knowing it. 2. Authority, bias, and blind obedience. In the synthesis of leadership and institutions, we see a close link between authority and trust. This is reinforced by authority bias. Humans have an instinct to comply with and trust those with status, academic titles, or symbols of power. When a manipulator uses intellectual bullying or borrows the name of large organizations, they are triggering this bias within you. True wisdom requires us to distinguish between status and truth. A statement does not become true simply because it is uttered by someone in power. 3. The rule of reciprocity, the chain called debt. Quiguzi taught, if you want to take, you must first give. Science calls this the rule of reciprocity. When receiving a gift, even the smallest one, or an unexpected favor, our brain develops an uncomfortable psychological pressure, the feeling of being indebted. This pressure compels us to repay, and often the price to be paid is much larger than the original debt. Manipulators often use small favors as bait, making you feel guilty if you do not comply with their unreasonable demands later on. 4. The bandwagon effect. When loneliness becomes fear, finally, there is the bandwagon effect. We are social creatures, and standing outside the majority brings a profound sense of insecurity. When seeing a group of people collectively believing in something, the brain tends to accept it as an obvious truth to avoid the feeling of isolation. Manipulators often create an appearance of consensus or use collective pressure to bend your individual will. 5. Reflections on scientific awareness. From this, we can infer that a sage is not someone without thinking errors, but someone who knows how to observe their own brain while it is making an error. When feeling an intense urge to repay, or a blind trust in a person with a glamorous appearance, the wise person will pause for a beat. They identify the bias in operation and separate emotion from logic. Understanding biases is not so that we become suspicious of everything, but to build an objective information filter. Delusion stems from believing in mental shortcuts. Wisdom begins by bravely taking the long road of analysis and verification. Chapter 6. Systemic Power and the Language of Control. Leaving behind the micro-interactions between individuals, our journey now expands to a more macro vision. A wise person not only understands human psychology, but must also understand how power operates within social institutions, from politics to religion. This is where the boundary between faith and control becomes most fragile. 1. The Golden Triangle. Leadership, authority, and trust. In the structure of any sustainable organization, there always exists an organic relationship between three elements: leadership, authority, and trust. Trust is not born naturally. It is nurtured through the legitimacy of authority. However, we can infer that when authority is no longer based on substantive values, but only on imposition, trust will gradually be replaced by fear or mechanical obedience. Research indicates that the stability of an institution depends on whether the leader maintains a spiritual or ideological connection with the masses. Once this thread breaks, a crisis of authority will arise. 2. When the power vacuum is filled by darkness, history and studies of various regions have proven a harsh rule. When an old system of authority collapses and leaves a vacuum, society often tends to seek out charismatic yet dictatorial individuals to cling to. In times of chaos, fear causes people to easily abandon critical thinking to follow promises of a new order. This is when charismatic leaders utilize the psychological mechanisms we discussed in previous chapters, but on a much larger scale, to establish absolute control. 3. The vision of the sage before power. Standing before complex power systems, the wise maintain an attitude of profound awareness. They understand that language can be a tool of control, so they always seek to peel away the wooden layers of words to look directly at the essence of matters. Based on academic research, we see that the strength of an individual lies in the ability to maintain independent thinking against systemic pressures. The wise do not resist in an extremist manner, but they never allow themselves to be dissolved into the currents of public opinion created by linguistic manipulation. They understand historical examples to draw lessons for the present, to keeping a cool head and a solid internal conviction. Conclusion: the harmony of wisdom. Concluding Chapter 6, we have understood how power operates in the shadows of words and institutions. A sage not only needs to know how to treat a single person, but also how to stand firm within a system. We have traveled together through the highs and lows of human wisdom, from the sophisticated techniques of the modern West to the profound strategies of the ancient East, showing the hidden corners of human instinct. In this final section, the wise do not see these as disjointed pieces. Instead, they find a point of contact where all currents of wisdom converge to create a complete metal for living. 1. The combination of external technique and internal heart. The wise understand that communication is a seamless combination of visible perception and the invisible heart. While modern techniques teach us nonverbal skills like the flooding smile or sticky eyes to establish initial rapport, Quiguzi teaches us the art of bai-hei, opening and closing, to comprehend the essence of things. We can infer that a wise person uses Western politeness as a shell to pave the way for connection. But inside, they retain Eastern stillness to observe and assess the situation. They flash a warm smile, but their mind is operating the technique of measuring the truth of the person opposite them. Subtlety here is not to deceive, but to create a safe, communicative space where both kindness and strategy serve the purpose of building sustainable relationships. 2. Language. From a tool of connection to a weapon of defense. In the modern world, the wise are masters of words. They know how to use parroting to encourage others to share, and yet they are sharp enough to recognize doublespeak, ambiguity, within systemic messages. We can infer that by mastering both the art of speech that wins hearts and the identification of passive-aggressive behaviors, the sage builds a sturdy fortress for their mental health. They do not give blunt answers about their work or home to nurture relationships, but they know how to use silence not to harm others, but to establish boundaries against the disrespectful. And they understand that language is a double-edged sword. It can create genuine trust, but it can also distort reality to control the masses. 3. Ethics. The compass for every action. Regardless of the technique used, the wise always place ethics as the foundation, and they understand the thin line between transparent persuasion and exploitative manipulation. Understanding both the white side, social skills, and the black side, manipulation, is the only way for a person to truly master their life. A wise person does not promote low schemes. They learn about them for risk prevention. They know how to use the art of Neijian to strike the right chord of the opponent to reach an agreement. But their intention is always directed toward fairness, much like following the rule of splitting bills or respecting personal boundaries. Like the 70-second stratagem of Quiguzi, seeking no fame or fortune, the letting go of blind ambition is the antidote to all types of manipulation. When the heart is clear, all schemes targeting greed become void. Before ending this video, we want to leave you with a question to contemplate. In your upcoming conversations, will you choose for your words to be seeds of kindness or a rope to bind? Communication is an art, and you are the artist. Equip yourself with knowledge so as not to be deceived. Practice subtlety to connect people, and preserve ethics to guide your actions. A wise person not only knows how to open and close at the right time, but also knows how to use their wisdom to protect light and justice. Hopefully, these stories and lessons of the sages today have infused you with new energy and a new perspective on the art of conduct. The world may be full of strategies and shadows, but when your heart is still enough and your mind is bright enough, all traps will manifest and all darkness will recede. Thank you for listening and accompanying us throughout this journey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel 365 Stories of the Wise Men. May you always remain awakened and keep your wisdom on every step of your path.